is widely regarded as the greatest coach in NFL history. Paul Rabil's the most recognized lacrosse player in the world. Their passion for lacrosse brings them together to discuss what it takes to be a champion. Year 2 of the Championship Chat will give you unique access to two incredible sports minds who continue to win at unprecedented levels. Well, we're back with the Championship Chat, and when you think of the championship mindset, the first person you think of in the sport of football is Bill Belichik. So, Coach, when you have championship teams, what are the non-negotiable attributes that all those teams have in that locker room?
Great work ethic and mental and physical toughness. And we play such a long season. It's a grind. You're seeing it in the NBA now. It's a long, tough season, and players have to be physically and mentally tough. There are always challenges. Guys get banged up. We play short weeks, long weeks. The weather, the circumstances of the game. You just have to mentally be able to be consistent day after day, after week, after week, after game, after game. And those are the best teams. And I think really that's true in all pro sports. The seasons are so long that there's a lot of mental and physical stamina. And a lot of times the physical stamina wears down because the mental stamina wears down. So those teams all had that.
You've won at every level. The national titles at Johns Hopkins, the MLL championships, Team USA. When you think of those championship teams, what comes to mind right away?
Well, I would say both of what Coach Belichick had mentioned. So guys with strong character, great work ethic, and have physical and mental endurance. I'll also say that I've lost at every level. So I've lost a national championship. I've lost a world championship. I've lost an MLL championship. And so from a player's perspective, I've been able to collect things that have worked and haven't. And what we're called to do as players is perform when it matters most. And the winning teams, and usually the best players on each team, add, like in basketball, a six-man stepping up. Or in lacrosse, sometimes a second-line midfielder will have 2 or 3 goals in the championship game. Usually need 1 or 2 of those. But in the end, your best players need to step up. And for me, making no bones about it, when you do, your team tends to win if your best is better than theirs. So talking about what I would do to help me get in that situation is spend a little bit more time in my routine. So I would make sure that I'd get there so that I can get 150 reps with each hand against the wall so I'm comfortable. I would make sure I'd try to get out on the field, and if we weren't allowed on the field, I'd ask for a goal in the locker room just so I could kind of get close and touch the net a little bit. When I say touch, shoot the ball into it. So creating those physical and then mental reps allow you to get out and come out hot, because getting off to a hot start's also really important, and then being resilient and having the endurance. So would think about ways to aid my performance, but also know that, like, hey, no bones about it. Everything's on the line now, and you have to show up and perform.
Yeah. What's been the most successful way in all the teams you've played on to bridge a coach's message with the players in the locker room?
Well, first you have to spend a lot of time with the coach. And I think that it's just like the bond that you have to build authentically with your teammates. It has to be there with the coach. Organizations in business and sports, they're top down. You have to have a culture from the ownership to the front office, and in our cases in college, the athletic department through the head coaches and assistant coaches, then through the captains. So you have to intentionally work on building that relationship and then say, how can I help? And a great coach and captain relationship will be a two-way street as well. So it's not just going to feel like you're the servant in the relationship between coach to captain to player. The coach will then ask you, hey, what do you think about this opponent? And I remember you telling me how you would sit with Tom Brady before playing Ed Reed in the Baltimore Ravens and thinking, Ed Reed is this safety that just doesn't match any other profile in our sport. He's on the line, then he's out 30 yards away, and then he's floating as a linebacker. And so what are you seeing, Tom? And then here's what I'm seeing. It's very collaborative, and I think that's so important.
I couldn't agree more with that. That the strength of the team between the players and the player and the coach is built through interpersonal relationships, through face-to-face conversations, through interactions, not snap face, your face, my face, instant face, or any other face. It's built through, that chemistry is built through interactions and the ups and downs and suffering defeats and having victories and successes and failures and learning from those and communicating those with each other. Absolutely, that is 100% the way I believe it's built.
You look at your career, you've always had firsts as a defensive coordinator when you take the Giants to Super Bowl. And then the first year you're a head coach and you take the Patriots to the Super Bowl. There's a first-time Final Four team in Albany. The program has never touched championship weekend. So everything from the bus rides to the hotels to the distractions. Based on your experience and your firsts, if you were to sit down with Scott Marr tonight, what would you tell him?
That it doesn't make any difference who's been there before. It doesn't matter what any team has done or hasn't done. The only thing that matters is what happens on Saturday when they perform. And we've seen many players, from Tom Brady to Malcolm Butler to whoever that nobody's heard of or that hadn't been in big games before, that went out and had big ones. Last year in Philadelphia, Foles. I mean, just because you haven't been in a big game doesn't mean you can't have a big impact in the game. And it's about performance. It's not about past reputation. It's about the performance for that day. And sometimes guys who haven't been in it light up and have the performance of a lifetime. Sometimes guys who have a lot of experience fall short. And I don't think there's necessarily a correlation. It depends on the individual player and how he prepares and plays that week. Certainly experience is an advantage to have. I'm not saying that. But I tell the team that, and look, nobody has more experience than I do. I've been in more of those games than anybody has. But it doesn't mean anything. The next one will be different. The next one will have its own challenges. And I'll have to do my best job in that game. It doesn't matter what happened in the other 28 or however many it was.
And I'll make a comment. I felt, because it was very believable, because it's like embedded in him. And I think that's really important, that we know that if coaches are being inauthentic, or if they really don't believe that they're here to win, or maybe there's something in the back of the head that the opponent's going to outmatch them and they might not win, the team usually feels that. And I'll give you a quick example. When we first met, I was a sophomore or junior in college, and he actually came through his relationship with Coach Petramala and watched practice. And so, we're all like gripping our sticks and nervous, and Coach Belichick's here with a whistle, and he's coaching us. And it's because not only did he bring his talent as a coach, but to your point around first time, this was a first time that I had ever been coached at the highest level of college by someone that I had never met. We go into the locker room, and we had a pretty bad practice. And he looked at all of us, and Coach Petra said, "Hey, Coach Belichick, you want to address the team?" And he goes, "You guys are Division I players. You can't catch and throw. What's wrong with you?" And we kind of looked there. We're just like, should we laugh? And we're like, nope. He's being serious. I'm in. I buy it. And I spent, I think, 2 or 3 hours after practice making sure that my stick was tighter for the next one. So there's this galvanization that takes place between the coaches to players, and Coach Marr this weekend has got to have that mindset. If the players are like, well, this is our first time, they have to believe him that it doesn't matter.
We're going to take a quick break, but we'll have more of the championship chat in just a moment.
It's almost every weekend in the spring, from probably when I was about maybe 13, 14 years old, like there'd be a lacrosse game. Navy had great teams, and it seemed like half the team was made up of Navy football players, so they would go play lacrosse. Because there were so many football players on the team, I started following it. So I played defense in Annapolis when I got to Andover. I played attack, and then at Wesleyan, first year was defense, then kind of a year on attack and midfield, and I was a backup goalie. So, it was kind of fun, got to do a lot of different things. Lacrosse is a sport you like to practice. I'm asked to look forward every day to going out on the practice field just to practice lacrosse. The sport's been great to me, and football lacrosse has been a big part of our kids' lives. I think I used to be the best one, now I'm the worst one. I'm seeing that transition run its course.
Lacrosse is at the core of Bill Belichick. Why do you love this game so much?
It's skill, it's contact, and it's fast. So I think those elements, and And there's really a high degree of strategy with man up, man down, face-offs, midfield play, offensive and defensive ends. There's a lot of strategy in the game as well, along with the skill, the speed, and the contact. And I think those are great features of the sport.
And the one thing we all have in common as lacrosse players is our lacrosse stick. It is near and dear to us. It's like the most intimate piece of sports equipment, you can argue, that's out there in any industry. Maybe a baseball glove. We talked about that a little bit. But why is a lacrosse stick so critical for a lacrosse player in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's a part of you. It just becomes a part of you. It's your best friend. You take it everywhere. You care for it. And especially when we get into the wooden ones, go through a little history on the sticks. This is one of the first, and this is when the game was played over a 1,000-yard field or 1,500 yards or whatever it was, where they just had natural goals, and they carried the ball. There was really not much passing or cradling. They just carried it and tried to take it away from each other and advance it past the goal line. That extended to this, which really was more of the Indian game, where they passed it and threw it, and that was the development of this type of a wooden stick. This stick, interestingly enough, starts from this. So they take a tree, and then they bend it, and then start to shave it down and get it into the shape like that. When I grew up, we played with these. In January or February, we'd go up to Baltimore, and there would be literally a couple thousand sticks in the racket, back rack raise, and just pull down each stick and try to get a feel for one that you liked, and you kind of felt the one that you liked, and that was your stick, and you just were married to that stick.
I don't know. This stick says Bill Belichik, Wesleyan. This could have been his senior year in college stick. I don't know. It says your name.
Yeah.
How about for you? What does a lacrosse stick mean to you?
So it is such a personal experience, as Coach covered, because it is one of the very few sports we have, stickball sports, where we're not actually catching the ball with our hands or kicking the ball with our feet, which if you're doing that, your hand-eye coordination feels natural. It's much higher. When you have a stick with the netting further away from your hands, following that ball into the pocket proves to be much more difficult. Also, your ability to cradle and what we call feeling the ball and shooting the ball accurately, passing it accurately, being able to catch the ball without looking at it. So as the game gets faster, you can make the next play without having to check your stick, like a lot of parents may see their kids do. They pick up a ball, they look to see if it's there, and then they throw it. So I always say your stick should feel like an extension of your body, or almost a third arm. And if you get to that place, you're reaching your potential as a lacrosse player. If you're not comfortable with your stick, no matter how talented you are, you're not going to perform well. And so I've always felt that way, and even to the degree of to younger kids out there, find it, if you're using mesh, find someone who's stringing your stick well. Right? If you're using a stick that has new warp technology, like Warrior's developing, then that's more consistent, and try to feel try to feel that pattern and how that release is going to take place. And so with that, that's how the sticks have developed. I didn't use a wooden stick. We were joking around earlier. I had to use this stick, I'm pretty certain that I would have tried to play football. So maybe that would have worked out better. But so what we have is two things that have happened. So the wooden stick is much more painful, but it's really heavy. So what happened was the manufacturers started creating aluminum technology for the handles, and then they created titanium, which bared the same weight and in some cases lighter than the aluminum, but had the strength of a wooden stick formerly. Coach was one of the first players to start using plastic heads, and then what we have now are additional technology to the shape of the head, but they're also offset. So what you get in an offset head through the mechanics of your motion is the ball is cocked back a little bit more, so you get a little bit more power on your release, and that adds miles an hour to your shot. I mentioned the mesh. Now we're starting to see, from my standpoint, the equipment begin to equalize, because I think with new technology brings more complications and choices for kids and parents. And you have a head, you have a handle, you have different types of meshes, you have different types of shooting strings. One of our biggest barriers in our sport is if you pick a stick up off the shelf and you don't know how to string a head, and that stick for some reason is wound tightly and your first throw is into the ground, you're more likely to stop playing as a younger kid. So in a way to try to fix retention or push that in the direction of where we like to see our sport, I think our sticks are going to start heading in the direction of hockey, where they become one stick, one piece, and then offered in hockey's version 3 different curves. So right now I mentioned the warp technology that Warrior's creating. Their goal, and I'm a Warrior athlete, so I'm endorsed by Warrior just for full transparency, but their goal is to try to equalize the sticks. So for those new kids that are picking the stick off the shelf, they can count on a consistent release and the ball's not flying or dipping, especially with weather. And then they have 3D knitting technology for the professionals that can have it created in a certain capacity where they can ask for it specifically to be strung up that way, and it works. So I think the technology is improving, as we're seeing in all sports, but in a stick and ball sport like lacrosse, it'll only improve with the right people.
Amazing stuff, and we can go all night on this, but we have to take another break. More of the Championship Chat in just a moment. We're back with the Championship Chat. Bill, when you look at the sport of lacrosse, and it's something that you love and you follow, when you watch coaches around the country at the Division I level, at the Division III level, what can Bill Belichik learn from a college lacrosse coach?
Well, I've learned a lot from Coach Petramala, I'll say that. And I've been in his meetings, I've been at practice, I've seen him talk to the team before the game multiple times, prepare his team multiple times. And I've learned from his preparation the way he handles and deals with the athletes, how sensitive he is to things that go on off the field, to reinforcing progress as well as criticizing failure, and really handling the players on an individual basis. What one player needs, another player may need something different. And being able to watch that up close, he's very, very good at it. And I learned a lot from him that way. I think the way that he presents the game plan to his team right before the game was something that I started doing. We go through the whole week and go through the game plan. We cover it very thoroughly. What Coach Petramala did was 30 minutes before the game, he would go through, Bobby would go through the offense, Dave would go through the defense, and talk about where we're going to slide. If this guy's in a game, all right, here's how we're going to pull the face-offs, whatever it was. But he just captured the whole game in 30 minutes. I wasn't there all week, but in 30 minutes, I could see exactly what they were going to do. And so we started doing that, and I think that helped our players refocus, because one of the things in our sport is too much information. So you talk about a team for a whole week, oh my God, there's like 8,000 things to remember. All right, let's bring it down to what do we really have to do here? Well, you can boil it down to 4 or 5 important things, maybe covered in 5-10 minutes. Well, that's really the heart of the game. It's not the 8,000 things. It's if we do these handful of things well, we'll win.
You've developed a great relationship with Bill. What have you learned from him?
Well, I feel really fortunate to have even just been let in. And I mentioned when we met when I was in college, and it was through your relationship with Coach Petramala. And I asked my coach on your second visit in if I could get 15 minutes of his time. And Coach Petro asked, and you said, sure. So we sat down in Coach's office and we talked. And I then asked him for his email. So we started trading emails, and when I graduated, he sent me a box of Patriots jerseys because he knew I grew up in Washington, D.C., and he said, you're now a Patriots fan. But from there, it was really, for me, like, wow, access to best in class. How much can I learn about sport and about leadership? But what I say that stands out by far compared to any other attribute that coach has is his curiosity. And you can feel it when you talk to him. More times than not in any industry, you find when people are at the top that it's their way, and that's why they're at the top, because they've accomplished it under certain circumstances and what they do well. I've never met anyone that has relationships with coaches at all different levels and all different sports. He has relationships with musicians because you see value in, wow, what's it take to be on stage in front of 100,000 people, prepare and execute. You mentioned your relationship with Coach Petro and his pregame boards of offense, defense, and special teams. Well, when I was lucky enough to come into your locker room one day before the Colts game, you had that same board up. So it's very real. He's constantly gleaning. And I sit here and say, wow, I'm so lucky to learn and just get a chance to talk to the greatest coach in all of sports. And he's probably sitting on the other side going, I wonder how Paul's thinking about his game next week. and that's really true. So that has a really large imprint on me, and I try to take that curiosity into other things that I do.
Yeah, and just say on the flip side of it, first of all, I thought you were going to mention I'd talk to you a little bit about fashion because, did a good job there.
You think these guys are going into the Hall of Fame tonight?
But, one thing I've learned from watching Paul, the greatest, one of the greatest athletes in the world, certainly the greatest athlete in his sport, is how you've learned to work. You've always been a really, really hard worker, the hardest worker on the team. You work smarter. And I think that's what I've learned for myself and also to transfer to other players that I coach, that hard work is great, working smarter is even better. And at times you got to take a break, at times you got to back off and use your time efficiently. And I've learned a lot of that from watching you, so I appreciate it.
Where do you see the sport of lacrosse going from a player standpoint?
So I think it's important to acknowledge a few statistics on our growth. And some of this comes from U.S. lacrosse surveys, but we have 2 million players that are playing the game right now. There are 6 million fans. Those numbers have increased, and they've been the only sport that have seen those increases over the past 15 years from a participatory level. In 2001, we had 9 countries playing in the World Games. This summer, we have the World Games in July in Israel. There are 58 participatory countries. Jim Scherr, who was the former USOC CEO, is now the CEO of the Federation of International Lacrosse. He completed an Olympic application last year. We're hoping to be recognized by the IOC, which would unlock access to rings, which means resources to all governing bodies that participate in the Olympics, which would help unlock further opportunity to play our sport and see our sport's growth at the participatory level. So from an athlete standpoint, if you have players like soccer or hockey coming in from all over the world, you have more access to talent, greater athletes playing the game. We'll see the level of play increase. We should institute rules that allow the game to be what it once was known for as the fastest game on 2 feet. The difference between lacrosse and football that we often talk about is that he gets to call a play every down. And that's why all of his teams win. In lacrosse,
You saying he wouldn't be a good lacrosse coach?
No, that's not what I said. In lacrosse, we get 1 or 2 plays out of a timeout or out of a quarter, and sometimes Coach Petro will never get us back in until the end of the quarter or the next TV timeout. So it's much more fluid. But by parsing it out into this more specialized game, they can make the substitutions, the coaches call the plays from the sideline. And so in a way, it's advantageous for the coach, or they're getting a little bit more control on the game, but it's at the loss of maybe the fast-paced action that we see in transition from the former Syracuse teams that we're seeing in Albany this year, that we saw in Brown a couple of years ago. So I think what we're finding is a little bit of a hybrid, but there are ways that you can encourage that, whether through limiting substitutions like they used to do, adding a shot clock, which I think is necessary at the college level. But the goal should be to celebrate it for the fast pace that the game is played at when it's at its best.
Well, gentlemen, this was a memorable championship chat, to say the least. I want to thank both of you for being incredible ambassadors for the sport. The sport's better because you play, and the sport is better because you root for this game. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.